Sometimes the things that we desire to have in our lives require us to be in a specific season in order to receive it. And the reality is that we may not be in that season yet, and there's nothing wrong with that. So you may want a relationship, you may want companionship, but the question is it really time? Are you truly ready for it? Now, do not confuse not being ready with not being good enough, so to speak, right? Don't internalize it in some kind of negative way. View it more so as, have I set the table for a dinner partner? All right. People always use that phrase about what you're bringing to the table, but it's like, but if you haven't set the proper table, it doesn't really matter yet. Okay. And we have to be mindful of how we set the table, not for the sake of that person, right? For the sake of ourselves, for the quality of our potential relationship, to make sure that we don't find ourselves in a negative cycle or feeling stuck or attached to someone who isn't best for us. And so there's some things I want you to ask yourself or to evaluate, because I do get the question a lot from tons of women about how do I know when I'm ready to date again? How do I know when I'm ready for a relationship? So I figured, all right, well, might as well break it down in the video and help everyone who has that question. So one of the first ways or first things to look at to determine or to realize maybe you're not ready for a relationship just yet is you're not flexible with your freedom. So here's what I'm talking about. First, let's start with the angle of sometimes when you've been single for a long time, you get really comfortable in your own space, okay? Like the world talks a lot about learning how to be alone and you gotta be happy to be alone. But there's some people who's like, I'm fine, I'm good, and are enjoying the freedom to go and come as you please and do what you want. And there's no one you have to consult with or anything like that. And listen, there's nothing wrong if you're loving that lifestyle, okay? There's nothing wrong if you feel like it's not worth coming out of that to be in a relationship. However, I don't want the perception to be, I don't want to come out of this lifestyle because I view relationships in such a negative way that that's the reason why to me it's not worth it. Okay? I don't want you operating from an unhealthy perspective that essentially causes you to hide behind that lifestyle rather than that's truly just where you are happiest, at peace, and that's really best for you in the long run. So we have to determine, okay, is it just a for now thing? Are we just in a season of that singleness, right, and having our freedom? Or is that really what's best for us in the long run? But anyways, getting back to not being flexible with your freedom. So in getting so comfortable and enjoying that life so much, what happens is sometimes we are looking at relationships as, all right, someone has to be convenient to what I've already set up. They have to fit into my life, and I'm not prepared to be flexible or make compromises to make sure it works with them as well. Okay? Now, as a grown adult, you are free to make that choice. But that's not going to set you up well for a relationship. And so what I really want for everyone to understand is that if you know whether you are just in the season of enjoying that freedom or whatever, if you know that at some point you will probably desire a relationship in your life, or you're even right now saying, okay, I don't really care for all this freedom. I'd rather be in a relationship right now. I'm just taking advantage of the freedom that I have before me. You have to start figuring out, you got to start creating the flexibility now. We should not wait till someone comes along. So the idea of, well, if someone comes, I'll make the necessary adjustments. That's risky, because if you cater your life to fit your current freedom, it's going to be harder to move things around when someone pops up. Not to mention, if there is any skepticism of men, relationships, so on and so forth, well, you're always going to have reasons to be like, you know what, maybe it's too soon to make adjustments for him, too soon to make any changes for this relationship. But that might be the exact thing that hinders it from growing into something special. Okay? So if we know we desire that, we have to say, okay, I can enjoy the freedom I have, but I'm not married to that mindset to where if someone comes along, I can adjust and be flexible. I'm not going to add things in my life that I cannot easily remove if necessary, if something amazing comes along. I'm going to build in flexibility into how I do things now so that it's not messy later on. That would be best. But if you are at a point where you are not willing to do that, okay, then yes, you're not ready for a relationship just yet. All right, so now here's another huge sign you are not ready for a relationship, and that is you have too much on your plate, okay? So this is piggybacking off what we just talked about with flexibility and being very attached to your freedom. But this is not, in this example, it's not even freedom because you just have so much already going on. You are just consumed with all the things you have to deal with, right? I remember one time I spoke in, I believe it was Toronto, and after the event, we had this meet and greet, and one of the ladies, she was an older woman, and she expressed to me, when I say older, I mean, she was probably, I don't know, 30s or whatever, 30s to 40s. Anyways, she expressed how, you know, she's not really having success with dating and finding a guy that she can make things work with. And I was like, I forgot how we got to it, but I essentially asked her like, okay, well, what's going on in your life? Because the way you're breaking things down, it sounds like you're just very busy. And she was, I don't remember the exact thing she was doing, but I think part of it was like she was DJing, had a job, she had her kids, there was this, it was just so much. And I was like, how is a man supposed to come into your life and build a relationship with you when you're so preoccupied and you don't have time to give him, right? And the unfortunate reality for a lot of women, it hit my spirit, so I have to say it. For women with kids, sometimes I've seen a lot of women with kids that they put their children into all these different activities, right? And again, nothing wrong with wanting to give your child all these different options and try the different things, but they go to an extent that, again, overwhelms them or has so much on their plate where they don't really have time for dating and relationships. But the unfortunate truth is that they're using that to hide behind it, okay? It's a defense mechanism. It's, if I put a lot on my plate, then I have an excuse not to put myself out there. I have an excuse not to be vulnerable and sit here hoping and waiting and wishing for a relationship. No, I'd rather distract myself, occupy myself so I don't have to deal with that. I don't have to deal with the desire of it. I don't have to deal with the hoping of it or anything that comes along with it. Or I don't have to deal with, again, what may be negative, unhealthy perceptions of men in relationships. And so a lot of people do that, kids or not, where they're overwhelming themselves in a way to distract themselves rather than facing the real issue at hand. So that's part of the problem. But then again, if an amazing man comes into your life tomorrow and you have so much going on, it's going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult. And the reality is that every last one of us, we have to be willing to make time. Like, and listen, I'm as guilty as anybody, right? When it comes to having a lot on my plate. Now, for me, and this can apply to many other women as well, me at times having too much on my plate is not a mechanism of let me distract myself. No, I'm just very overly ambitious. This thing, I want to do it. I want to try this. I want to do this. And I'm attacking so many different things. But I have to learn, I've had to learn to slow down, to kind of organize, to pray and find out through God, okay, is it time to add this thing over here? Is it time to pursue this venture? No matter how much I want it or I think I need to take advantage of it right now, it may not be time for that, right? But then again, I have to also understand and respect the fact that if I don't make space for someone to come in, then how is that going to all work out? So for you have to say, okay, it doesn't mean you can't be doing things. It doesn't mean you can't be pursuing different things. I do think you have to pray about it. I do think that you have to make sure you're not using this as a defense mechanism. I do think that you have to make sure that, again, you have the flexibility with the things you are pursuing. So it's almost like, all right, if I'm going to add this on my plate, is it something that I can easily remove if someone comes into my life that I really feel something towards? All right. If yes, cool. If no, then let's not add it at all. Or if it's already been added, let's work towards that flexibility. Or for some of you, you just need to remove it. Because here's another thing I have to mention. All right. With this whole having too much on your plate. One thing I feel people underestimate is mental exhaustion. And it is of my opinion, and I'm going to say professional opinion, that I believe women go through even higher levels, typically in general, higher levels of mental exhaustion compared to men. Because even when women are not maybe on paper, maybe they're not stacking up all these different things and it doesn't look like they have a lot on their plate, their minds are filled with so much and they're concerned about so many different things and they are dealing with so many different things on their own. And that wears you down. So when you have this full plate of stuff, you are so mentally exhausted that you don't have the energy to not just show up for a relationship or the process of dating, to show up for yourself. Okay? Not to mention the amount of stress you're putting on yourself and how that is affecting your body. How that's affecting you emotionally, mentally, physically. It is causing problems. And there's so much I want to say about stress and identifying what's actually unnecessary things that you are including in your life and how it's negatively impacting you. But that's going to have to be a different whole video. Bottom line is you got to be careful with the whole overloading your plate. Man or not, ready for a relationship or not, for your sake, for your quality of life, some of you got to take a step back and some of you need to remove things so that you can be healthier and happier in your everyday life. All right, so let's keep this thing going. I'm sorry. Let's keep this thing going. And then another big sign that you're not ready for a relationship. And let me just say right now, I don't completely agree with what I'm about to say, and I'll explain what I mean by that, okay? So the next thing that you can look for is you're not financially stable, okay? So now let me explain why I say I don't agree with it, and then I'll explain why I put it on the list. So I don't necessarily agree with it to the extent of the reality is that depending on the type of man that you meet, your financial standing is not going to necessarily work against you, even if you're not stable or, paying your own bills or living on your own or whatever the case may be, okay? If he has his stuff together and he has his money, he's not really going to care in many cases. There'll be some men who do, but for the most part, he's not. Now, of course, other men who may still be struggling, may not be as stable, or may just be on the borderline or whatever, the less the man has of his own, the more likely he's going to be concerned with what you have, all right? But the more he has, the less concerned he can become. So for that reason, I would say, no, you don't necessarily have to be financially stable to be ready for a relationship because that's not where he sees your value, okay? On the flip side, I put it on here because I do understand that I'm not trying to tell women like, don't do for yourself. I'm not trying to say don't strive to be able to be stable. I think that is something that we all should be doing while we're single. I think that would be good. I do think I don't want women to define their value by finances, achievements, all these things, simply because when it comes to men, right? When it comes to being able to attract a partner and things of that nature, because simply in most cases, that's not going to be priority. It's nice, it's good, it has its value, but it's not what he really looks at. I think the character of a woman, her energy, her spirit, all these things, that is even more important. And then the other stuff is like icing on the cake. And of course, there's exceptions to every rule. Some people may disagree, but again, I think this is a general rule of thumb. But the bottom line is, again, I put it on here because I do think that for you as a woman, what I also don't want you the position to find yourself in is that because of your instability, you accepting a relationship that isn't best for you. Because of your instability, you entertaining a man because, he's willing to take care of some things, but deep inside, you're not feeling him like that. Now, listen, as grown adults, everyone can choose to do what they want to do. But I've also seen women find themselves in very toxic situations. Now, let me make clear, that doesn't mean every man who is willing to provide for you or spend on you is going to be toxic or negative. I don't like when people do that, because that's just not true. There's toxic broke men, there's toxic rich men, all right? Like, it ain't exclusive to one, all right? And there's toxic in between men. Like, that's different than their financial status. Granted, yes, there may be some people who let their financial status get to their head to where they think they can act and talk to people any kind of way, but that's not really their money. That's their character being exposed by their money. You feel what I'm saying? So don't just place this idea of, well, if he got money, he's willing to spend, it's because there's something going on. He's trying to control you. No, not every situation is like that. But as a woman, establishing things for yourself is great, right? But again, I have to go back to saying, don't get so caught up in it to where, like, I've seen women question their value and question why a man would want to be with them. And when I say why a man, not just any man, but literally have a specific man that is attracted to them, that's trying to get to know them, that wants to be with them. And they're having battles with their own insecurities of, why would he want me? I'm not educated. I don't have this degree, or I don't make this money, or I'm not stable. And it's like, yo, he does not care about that. That's not where he sees your value. He sees you as a woman, and he loves that. That other stuff is not going to make or break things, okay? Now, I feel the need to mention, I guess you could say it's hit my spirit again. One thing I do think women should be mindful of, regardless of your financial standing, is, are you bringing in any kind of financial debts or issues that can become a problem, okay? So if that's the case, we want to work on that. But again, that doesn't mean just because it's not fixed that you are not worthy of a relationship, that you will not be desired or valued or genuinely loved by a man who wants to be with you, regardless of what's going on with you financially. So don't get lost in it. Don't define yourself by it. Yes, you can strive to achieve certain things and stabilize and be successful. All that stuff is beautiful, beautiful. But don't let that consume you, and don't let that cause you to, or distract you from the reality that you have to make sure you are nurturing and pouring into your spirit, yourself, your character, your growth as a woman, because that's what's going to make you shine really bright when it comes to love and relationships and a healthy, successful, long-term one. All right, so we got a few more to go. Another huge sign you're not ready for a relationship is you're still not over your ex. So, excuse me. There's an unfortunate reality that a lot of people, have been through disappointing relationships, have been hurt, have been heartbroken. And, at some point you got to move on, right? But people are moving on the surface, meaning that, yes, they may not be actively pursuing or dwelling on it anymore. They may not be worried or even checking that person's social media anymore like they were at one time, right? But internally, emotionally, they never truly resolved what was going on there. They never really found peace with their feelings about the person. They just pretty much pushed it to the side, locked it away, and just tried to move forward. And then you get into these new relationships, and there's the baggage of whatever trauma may have occurred in that experience, that disappointment, that hurt, that now you're bringing to the new person. But also the fact that because you have not gotten over that person, the door is still open for them to wreak havoc in your life. In the sense that, I mean, listen, I've seen plenty of situations where people move on to a new relationship, never really getting over their ex, thinking, okay, it's done, it's over, I gotta leave this alone. And then the ex pops back up talking about, I want us to give this another chance, I want to be with you, whatever. And everyone can say, oh no, leave them alone, you don't go back to them. All right, that sounds great. And I'm not saying I disagree in many cases, not all. However, in that moment, if you have not gotten over them, it probably won't play out that easy. All right. And even in saying maybe no and rejecting their advances, it may really rattle that person. It may really put them in a negative headspace, and then it can impact that current relationship that they're in. Even if you haven't moved on to a new relationship yet, you're still single. Not being over them, whether you realize it or not, you're in many ways emotionally unavailable for the next person. You're not going to be able to show up in your fullness for a new situation because there's parts of you still lingering in the previous situation. Okay? So this is why it's so important that we make sure we just don't jump from relationship to relationship. Like, I think one of the worst advice that people give in these types of scenarios is, oh, you need to get under someone to get over someone. That's very horrible advice because it's very unhealthy. It can create more messiness. It does not solve the problem in any kind of way. And it's not fair to you or the new person that you bring into your life, right? What you should be doing is making sure you take time to heal from your previous relationship, getting to a place where you are truly over your ex. Now, I have a rule that you don't move on to a new relationship unless you feel stronger for them than you did for your previous person or any previous person. They have to essentially set a new bar. Because if not, if you get with someone new, so basically if your ex bar is here and the new person bar is here, okay, you will always feel a void. You will always feel something missing. And that is very difficult to sustain over the long term. Many people have tried, many people have failed. Maybe failure comes in year 1, maybe year 5, year 10, year 15, but it fails. And understand that just because somebody makes it to year 15 with someone, that doesn't mean they had 15 years of happiness and then finally they're like, okay, I can't do this anymore. No, it typically means 15 years of miserable, unhappy, or unfulfilled. If not 15, maybe the first year was cool, but then after that, it went downhill. Like, it's just not a good situation to be in. So, if you know you're not over your ex, if you know that can be, forget if you even know that you're not over your ex, because there's a lot of people who will hear this and say, no, I'm fine. I'm good. I've been let them go, right? But you never really healed from it. You haven't properly released it. And and when you don't, there's a trigger waiting to happen. There is something that's going to occur in your future that's going to trigger that unresolved emotion, hurt, disappointment that you haven't released. So go through the healing process. If you need help with the healing process, please check out my book, Love After Heartbreak. It lays out all the steps to healing for you. Follow the steps. Do everything it says. It's going to change your life for the better, I promise you. Go to loveafterheartbreak.com, or you can click the link in the description or in the comment section. All right, so here's another sign, another big one that you are not ready for a relationship. And that is you actually are afraid of love. Now, this is kind of piggybacking on what we just talked about, right? I know we just talked about, the not being over an ex. However, in people experiencing hurt and disappointment, it creates a fear of being vulnerable, okay? And what we all have to understand is that to truly love requires vulnerability. To experience the fullness of relationships requires vulnerability. So when you fear vulnerability, you fear love. You may not look at it that way because you'll have a lot of people say, I'm looking for love. I just want to be loved. I just need love. Okay, great. But do you understand what that really means? Because some of those same people, if love slapped them in the face, they wouldn't know what to do. It would scare them. It would overwhelm them. They would start to have flashbacks of last time I was vulnerable, I got myself hurt, or someone took advantage of me, or whatever the case may be. And then instead of being able to embrace it, run from it. All right. And I can tell you, for those of you who've watched previous videos of mine, I'm very big on connection, right? And I won't get all deep into the definition of connection right now, but I believe connection is one thing I always say is like connection is your spirit recognizing its match. It's a very deeper experience, okay? And to me, this is where real love resides. True love, full vulnerability, because when people experience a connection, it pulls everything out of you. All right. It'll pull your insecurities out, all your vulnerabilities. It will expose you. You will be left emotionally naked. And that can be very scary if you haven't worked through some things. All right. So I've seen, I even say that for a lot of people, when they experience a connection, it tends to not work out the first time around. All right. Meaning when those first two people first pick up on it, sense it, experience it, because it's a lot to deal with. It's a lot to handle, okay? And again, without proper healing, it can be mishandled and rejected, denied. But it doesn't change the fact that it's still there, okay? So we've got to recognize when we have that fear of vulnerability. Because I feel like if you ask yourself, well, am I afraid of love? That may not register with you. But if you ask yourself, am I afraid to be fully vulnerable? Yeah, that one hits you. that one connects, okay? And so, and if we are, where did that come from? This is where we address things. This is where we do the exercises in the Love After Heartbreak book. We've got to be willing to face those fears, face those hurts, and flush them out of our system so that we are not going to block love when it comes. We are not going to run from it when it comes. We'll be able to stare it in the face and say, about time you got here, okay? And be happy and hold on to it and run with it and live in it to its fullest. And that's what I want you to experience. All right, just a couple more to go. And so here's another sign you are not ready for a relationship. And it's that you have not embraced who you are. Now, I chose to phrase that way specifically for this reason, because I was initially going to say you don't know yourself yet, right? Or you haven't found yourself. But I'm a firm believer that for a lot of people, especially after we get past a certain age, right? Certainly later in our adulthood, I feel like a lot of people, the issue is not finding themselves. The issue is accepting themselves. That the reality is that many people, they have seen parts of them. They understand different things about themselves, but they are at conflict with it. They have not accepted it for what it is. They have not been allowed to even celebrate it because, let's just say, society or family or friends or whoever has led them to believe that something's wrong with that, so to speak. Okay? So, for example, I believe that there are a lot of women and men who they have a very high premium on quality time. They love to be up under their partner, okay? Now, a lot of people in the world may refer to those people as clingy, okay? I don't view it as, we can call it clingy, but I don't view it in a negative way. To me, no. There are just some people who they really value being close to their partner constantly. They like to make each other their world, though I do think we should have a world that expands beyond our partners. Listen, different people are wired differently, and it's about what truly works best for you. And as long as it's coming from a healthy place and not an unhealthy one, there's nothing wrong with it. But again, if you are led to believe, oh, I'm doing too much, or I'm too clingy, or whatever, now you're restricting and suppressing that part about you, and you have not accepted who you are. Because on the flip side, there are women and men who love freedom more. Like, okay, they can be with their partner and be fully indulged and give their full attention, but they like their space sometimes. They like to be a little bit more free. They like to roam around. They might be able to do things on their own. It doesn't have to always be with their partner, right? It's not as important to them in the way that it is for that other example of a person that I gave. And there's nothing wrong with that either. That's just who they are. But if they let the world tell them, oh, what's wrong with you? You should always include your partner in everything. And I'm not saying don't include them in the sense of don't let them know what's going on, what you're doing, all that type of stuff. But there's nothing wrong with doing your own thing sometimes, as long as you and your partner are on the same page and no one's doing anything crazy and inappropriate. Nothing wrong with that, okay? But again, those type of people have to align with individuals who are on the same page as them, the same way the individual who wants that closeness more consistently needs to align with someone who's on the same page with them. But that's just one example of how we are in denial of who we are in various ways. I'm gonna give you another example. I'm gonna use myself. I tell this a lot when I'm on tour, this story of how like, I'm extremely ambitious. I'm very like on to the next. I need to do the next thing, conquer the next challenge. That's just how I'm wired, right? But I was made to feel for a long time that something's wrong with that. Like, what's wrong with you? Just be happy with where you are. Why do you need to do more? Blah, 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 right? And it got to me to where I was like, okay, dang, maybe this is a problem. And I need to stop. And I chose, like, there was a month where I said, all right, I'm going to stop trying to pursue different things and always doing something. Let me just chill and be happy with what I've already accomplished and don't worry about accomplishing more. And that was one of my most depressed months of my life. And I felt like, I always say, I felt like a neutered dog. I felt like the fire was removed from my belly. Like life was just not the same. And I had to come to the realization and acceptance that I'm wired like this for a reason. And there's no reason for me to be in denial of it, because when you're in denial of it and you suppress it, you're at conflict with yourself. You're not happy. You're not at peace. What I had to learn was, no, don't stop being yourself. Don't stop being this ambitious man, driven man, but learn how to manage it in a healthy manner. Learn how to do it as we spoke about earlier, like not creating unhealthy attachments to certain things and ventures that can then make it harder for you to have more quality time in your relationships, family, all these different things. So I had to learn how to better manage it, but don't stop being me. You see? So this is why I say you haven't accepted yourself. Now, granted, for some of you, there may be some more self-discovery. There may be some things you have not realized about who you are. And this is important before entering into a relationship. Now, do I think it's impossible to enter into one not having fully completed that work and be able to find success? Yeah, it's possible, but it's risky. It's risky because unfortunately for a lot of people, if they don't find themselves or accept themselves until after they get into a relationship, what they may find is who they are does not align with who they chose to be with. Okay? And unfortunately, depending on how deep they got into this before they made this discovery, they may not feel comfortable or empowered to walk away from this person, especially when technically this person has done nothing wrong. They're not a bad person. They haven't mistreated you. They haven't cheated. They haven't done anything wrong, but you've come to the realization we don't really fit. You see, and I've seen so many marriages like this where there's this huge disconnect and nothing gets solved. And then all it does is start to deteriorate the relationship or the marriage to where eventually it does inevitably fail. And so we can save ourselves a lot of those headaches and disappointments. And what I feel in some cases is wasted time. I know some people view that differently. Like, no time is wasted. I don't completely agree, but that's a whole different discussion. Either way, a lot of that can be avoided by coming to acceptance of ourselves. Now, accepting ourselves does not mean we are not continuously growing. We're continuously evolving who we are and becoming better versions of ourselves. But we have to get to the foundation of who we are first, or that would be best to do that first before entering a relationship, because then it will ensure you are more clear about who you align with, right? And you can find more long sustained happiness and success. All right, so I actually still had some more, but I think I'm gonna have to make a part 2 to this video because there's a lot other stuff I need to discuss with y'all. So I'm just gonna make this final point very quick. right? And I'm going to simply say this. Another sign you are not ready for a relationship is you're too focused on men and not yourself. What I mean by that is this. So in piggybacking off the idea of finding or accepting ourselves, I come across a lot of women, and I'm going to be real with y'all. I love y'all. I love y'all. I want the best for y'all, genuinely. But it does bother me and to an extent disappoint me when I hear women come to me and say, oh, you're giving women advice. Why you need to talk to these men. It's these men that's the problem. It's men, right? Now, number one, just so we're clear, I have a channel for men. I have books for men. I coach men. So I actually am speaking to men, all right? However, regardless of that, what I want a woman to understand is that your success in life, in relationships, in any aspect of it, is dependent on you, not other people. If you make the focal point other people, well, the men just need to start doing this, or this person needs to start doing that, you are taking away your power to create change and leaving yourself as a victim to the world. That's not going to get you far, okay? Now, does that mean there aren't things that a lot of men out there need to learn? Of course there's things that a lot of them need to learn. There's a lot of them that need to do better in a lot of ways. However, there's a lot of good men too. And if you are not doing what is necessary for you to get in the right place, you will not be able to receive what is best for you. So you cannot make the focus about them or all these external factors if you want to see progress in your life. Now, I don't want you focusing on things you can't control. You cannot control what men do. You can only control what you do. And I know that it may not feel like what you do is enough, or it's just, this is like this overwhelming battle you can't win. No, you can. You can experience amazing results, but you have to keep the focus on you, what God wants you to do, how you need to evolve. And I'm telling you, you will see the results come, and you will empower yourself, and you will allow yourself to not get caught up in all these outside distractions that's taking your eye off the prize of where you're headed, what you need to do, and what blessings you're going to receive by getting there. Thank you for watching this video. I pray it was helpful to you. Be sure to watch this one over here on why God isn't removing your feelings for that man. And I know many of you don't believe in it, and you feel like if it's not the right time, it can't possibly be the right guy. I have to tell you sternly, that's simply not true.